My name is Ren Black, and I've always believed that kindness should come with boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach someone the consequences of their choices. Let me tell you about the time my sister learned this lesson the hard way. My sister Grace Black stood at my doorstep that afternoon, holding the hand of her 3-year-old son Tyler. Her face wore that familiar expression I knew all too well, a mixture of impatience and entitlement that suggested the world owed her countless favors. "Ren, I need you to watch Tyler for a few days," Grace announced without preamble. "Connor and I are going to Hawaii. We'll be back in 2 weeks." As she spoke, she was already pushing the little boy toward me, her tone suggesting this was less a request and more a foregone conclusion. Before I could even process what was happening, she had already turned on her heel and was dragging her suitcase toward the elevator. The sharp click of her high heels against the corridor's tile floor echoed with each retreating step, a staccato rhythm of abandonment. Tyler stood in my doorway, his small body racked with sobs. His little denim jeans were soaked through with urine, and the acrid smell began to permeate the air around us. The child was clearly distressed, confused, and completely unprepared for this sudden abandonment. I immediately tried calling Grace. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. By the 17th attempt, every single call had been declined. Finally, she simply turned off her phone entirely, cutting off any possibility of communication. The next morning, I bundled the still sniffling Tyler into my car and drove directly to the most expensive private daycare facility in the city. Sunshine Hills Daycare commanded $1,500 per month, including full board, etiquette classes, art instruction, and French lessons. It was exactly the kind of establishment that catered to Beverly Hills families who spared no expense for their children's education. I approached the front desk with complete confidence. "Cost is not an issue," I informed them crisply. "Please send all billing statements to this phone number." I provided them with Grace's contact information, ensuring that every penny of this unexpected expense would be properly attributed to the person responsible for creating this situation. 3 days later, my phone rang with a barrage of calls from Hawaii. Grace's voice was sharp with panic and fury. I calmly closed my apartment door behind me, watching as Grace and Connor disappeared into the elevator with their luggage. The heavy oak door muffled the sound of their retreating suitcase wheels, but it perfectly preserved the ear-piercing wails that now filled my apartment. Tyler stood in my entryway like a small noise-making statue. His cries were sharp and grating, making my eardrums ache with their intensity. Tears and mucus covered his face, and the wet stain on his dark blue jeans was spreading steadily. The smell of urine began contaminating my freshly mopped hardwood floors. I felt absolutely no sympathy whatsoever. Perhaps for a 3-year-old child, he might be considered innocent. But in my eyes, he and his selfish mother Grace were a single entity at that moment. Mobile disruption that had invaded my private space without invitation or consideration. I bent down and retrieved a spare phone from my shoe cabinet, opening the video recording function. I carefully aimed the lens at the child who continued his ear-splitting tantrum by my door. I methodically documented his tear-streaked face, his soaked pants, and that suspicious puddle spreading across my floor. I panned the camera to capture the wall clock, recording the precise time and date down to the very second. This was evidence, ironclad proof of the exact moment she had dumped this disaster onto me. After saving the video, I walked into the kitchen and pulled on disposable rubber gloves, forcing myself to overcome my physical revulsion as I attempted to deal with this mess. "Stop crying," I said in a flat, emotionless voice. He acted as though he hadn't heard me at all. If anything, his wailing reached an even higher pitch. I retrieved a carton of organic milk from the refrigerator, inserted a straw, and held it out to him. "Drink this." He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he flailed his small arms wildly and knocked the milk container right out of my hands. White liquid splashed everywhere, some of it splashing onto my pants, but most of it spraying across my nearby easel and the artwork resting there. My breathing stopped for a full second. That was an illustration I had been creating for a high-end cosmetics brand's Halloween limited edition packaging. I had been in the final stages of completion. Now the delicate bat in the lower right corner was completely covered by a sticky, milky white mess. The artwork was utterly ruined. That illustration was worth $8,000. I stared at the spreading stain, feeling my irritation and anger crystallize into a cold, hard stone in my chest. Perfect. I turned away from the child without another word, ignoring the chaos on the floor entirely. I opened the door to my spare bedroom, which I used primarily for storage. I walked over and grabbed Tyler by the arm. He struggled and kicked, but I was considerably stronger than he was. Without saying a single word, I dragged him into the spare room and closed the door behind him, turning the lock. His piercing cries and the sound of his small fists pounding against the door came through the wood, muffled but still annoying. I chose to ignore it completely. I returned to the living room and sat down at my workstation, opening my laptop. In the search bar, I typed, Los Angeles high-end, full-time, residential, daycare. Countless results appeared on my screen. I filtered out anything that looked flashy but was obviously just a family operation. My attention locked onto a website for a place called Sunshine Hills Daycare. The website was designed like a luxury brand's official page. The promotional photos showed children dressed in proper uniforms, their faces wearing angelic smiles. Their slogan was particularly eye-catching. 2 weeks, return you an angel baby. I let out a cold laugh. I didn't need an angel. I just needed someone to take this little demon off my hands. The monthly fee was $1,500. I found their online consultation portal, and a chat window popped up immediately. Hello, Sunshine Hills, brightening your child's future. How can we help you? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Can you accept temporary full-time children? Approximately 2 weeks. Their response came quickly. Absolutely, we have emergency special care services and can accommodate enrollment at any time. Fees are calculated daily at $100 per Dalton Y. Cost is not an issue, I replied without hesitation. We'll need guardian information for registration purposes. I opened a folder on my computer without any hesitation whatsoever. Grace had once asked me to help her scan identification documents for updating her apartment's electronic access system. And I had saved copies. I copied and pasted Grace's name, phone number, and social security number exactly as they appeared, then sent everything. This is the child's mother's information. What is your relationship to the child? I am her sister, I answered truthfully. Then I scheduled an enrollment assessment for 9 o'clock the following morning. That night, the crying from the spare room progressed from intense to hoarse, finally dying down completely in the deep hours of night. I put on gloves and briefly cleaned up the artwork and floor contaminated by milk. I threw that $8,000 ruined illustration into the trash can, like it was nothing more than a used napkin. Before going to bed, I stood by the garbage can and looked once more at that crumpled waste paper. My gaze was ice-cold, completely devoid of warmth. Grace, I thought to myself, I hope you'll enjoy this wonderful gift I am sending you while you are basking in that Hawaiian sunshine. The next morning at 8 o'clock, I was awakened by the sound of banging from the spare room. Tyler had slept well and was beginning a fresh round of tantrums. I ignored him completely, walking straight to the bathroom to wash up, then preparing a simple breakfast. After finishing the last bite of scrambled eggs, I checked the time. 8:30. I opened the spare room door. Tyler looked like a small, bristling animal, glaring at me with red, swollen eyes. I want mommy. I want to go home. He shouted at me, his voice hoarse from crying. I crouched down, trying to make my expression appear non-threatening. I am taking you somewhere fun. He clearly didn't believe me and seemed ready to continue his tantrum. I lost patience immediately and simply picked him up, tucking him under my arm like an unruly package. He kicked his feet frantically and pounded his small fists against my back, but I paid no attention whatsoever. Once outside, I placed him directly into the back seat of an Uber. His wailing throughout the journey stopped abruptly when we reached our destination. Sunshine Hills Daycare was located in a prestigious residential area of Beverly Hills. The standalone 3-story building came with an enormous lawn and garden. Its exterior looked less like a school and more like a small 5-star resort hotel. I carried Tyler out of the car. A teacher wearing an elegant uniform approached us with a welcoming smile as soon as she saw us. "Good morning, welcome to Sunshine Hills." She greeted us first in English. Seeing Tyler's confused expression, she immediately switched to Mandarin, saying, "Good morning, little friend, welcome to Sunshine Hills." Her voice was so gentle, it seemed like honey. Tyler was captivated by this beautiful castle before him and the gentle teacher. He temporarily forgot about crying, his teary eyes curiously examining everything around him. The lobby was carpeted with soft wool rugs and scattered with various imported wooden toys that obviously came with hefty price tags. Several children of different ethnicities were playing on slides, their laughter and chatter flowing in fluent English. Tyler's eyes widened with wonder. I had made an appointment a previous day, and a director named Miss Johnson received us. We sat in the bright, airy reception room while an assistant brought coffee and freshly squeezed orange juice for the child. Tyler held that beautiful glass of juice and sipped it slowly, finally becoming completely quiet. "Miss Black, good morning," Miss Johnson said. She had an elegant demeanor and looked like a seasoned corporate executive. "Miss Johnson, here is the situation," I said, getting straight to the point. "I am the child's aunt. His mother left him at my house and then disappeared. I have neither the obligation nor the ability to care for him long term." I showed her the video on my phone and the dozen or so unanswered calls I'd made to Grace. Miss Johnson looked at the video showing the child's miserable condition and the chaos in my apartment, understanding evident in her eyes. "I understand completely, Miss Black. The fact that you've brought him here safely shows tremendous responsibility on your part." She nodded. "We do indeed have procedures for handling similar emergency situations." She pulled out a document from her drawer and placed it in front of me. "This is our emergency special care contract. The daily fee was $100, including room, board, courses, and one-on-one initial emotional support. The contract required guardian information and signature. Fees will be billed directly to the guardian's phone as daily statements. If payment is refused, we pursue collection through legal channels," Miss Johnson added. This was exactly what I wanted. I picked up the pen and unhesitatingly wrote Grace Black in the Guardian section, then signed my name. I pointed to a supplementary clause in the contract. "Please make sure to note here that all billing notifications and contact matters should only go to this Grace Black. I am merely the delivery person and am not responsible for any decisions or fees." Miss Johnson smiled and agreed. "Of course, we'll handle that properly." I pulled out my credit card from my wallet. "I'd like to prepay 3 days as a deposit, $300. Please also record this payment in detail on Grace Black's first bill as an amount she needs to reimburse me for." I wanted her to know that every penny I spent would ultimately be charged to her account. After completing the paperwork, a teacher gently approached and took Tyler's hand. "Shall we go take a bath and change into our beautiful Sunshine Hills uniform? We'll have dinosaur cookies afterward." Tyler looked at the teacher's kind smile, then glanced back at me with my expressionless face. Surprisingly, he didn't resist and simply nodded obediently. The teacher led him toward the charming door that led to the children's area. Throughout the entire process, he never looked back at me once. I stood there watching his small figure disappear behind the door, then turned and walked out of Sunshine Hills. The October California sunshine felt warm against my skin. I took a deep breath, feeling like all the frustration that had been building in my chest over the past 24 hours was completely expelled with that single exhale. Getting rid of an enormous problem turned out to be surprisingly easy. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber home, feeling more relaxed than I had in ages. The following 3 days were the most peaceful and pleasant period of my solitary life in recent memory. Without my sister's constant requests for help, and certainly without that little demon's crying, my world contained only the gentle scratching sound of brush against paper and the smooth jazz flowing from my speakers. I efficiently recreated that destroyed illustration in just 2 days, and it turned out even better than the original. The client was extremely satisfied, and payment came through quickly. To reward myself, I even made a special trip to Whole Foods to buy expensive organic ingredients for a lavish dinner. Just as I was cutting into a perfectly prepared medium-rare steak, my phone began vibrating frantically. An unknown number flashed on the screen with a Hawaii area code. Here we go. I calmly chewed and swallowed my bite of steak, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, then unhurriedly pressed the answer button. Hello. Ren. Grace's hysterical shrieking burst through the phone, with the sound of ocean waves audible in the background. Clearly she was having quite the enjoyable vacation. What did you do to Tyler? Where did you take him? Why did I receive 3 billing texts in one day totaling almost $500? Are you out of your mind? Her voice was like a chainsaw attempting to pierce my eardrums. I held the phone away from my ear and responded calmly. Grace, you need evidence when making accusations. Isn't your son exactly where you left him? Which is at my house. I deliberately paused, clearly hearing her rapid breathing. Of course I had to take responsibility for his safety and education. Sunshine Hills Daycare is the finest daycare facility in Los Angeles, with top-tier facilities and programs. I felt this was worthy of your precious son's status. How dare you make that decision for me? Grace roared through the phone. Who gave you permission to send him to that kind of place? Are you so money crazy that you are conspiring with strangers to scam me? I am telling you, go pick up my child right this instant. I let out a soft laugh. Pick him up, certainly. I spoke slowly and deliberately. Put him where? Your house. Did you leave me keys? Or are you suggesting I should continue keeping him at my place? I shifted my tone, my voice becoming colder. By the way, let me remind you that the illustration he destroyed was worth $8,000 in commission fees. When exactly do you plan to settle that account with me? Grace was clearly speechless. After several seconds, she resorted to her old tricks and began throwing a tantrum. I don't care, you are heartless, you are extorting me. I am warning you, when I get back you'll pay for this. Don't think just because mom and dad favor you that you can do whatever you want. Oh, I drew out my response. Are you threatening me? I opened the recording function on another phone on my desk and put it on speaker, positioning both devices close together. Grace, I am recording everything we're saying right now. You forced your child on me and then disappeared. I have video evidence of that. The bills are from Sunshine Hills, based on a contract with your signature, although I signed it as your representative using your identity information, which legally constitutes apparent authority. If you continue to harass and threaten me this way, I don't mind sending all this evidence to mom and dad. I paused, adding word by word, let them judge who is really bullying whom here. Dead silence on the other end. I could imagine Grace's face, twisted with rage and shock. You are despicable. She finally managed to squeeze out these words in her fury, then angrily hung up. I set down my phone and continued enjoying my steak. The meat was tender and flavorful, I named that fresh recording Grace's first threat and carefully stored it in my evidence folder. I felt absolutely delighted. I hadn't even finished my steak when another Hawaii number called. This time I guessed it was Grace's husband, Connor, that adult-sized infant who was equally accustomed to pushing responsibility onto others. I answered the call. "Hello, is this Ren?" A man's voice came through, reasonably polite in tone but with an undertone of false familiarity. "I am Tyler's father, Connor. What do you want?" I didn't want to waste words with him. He seemed momentarily taken aback by my directness but quickly recovered. "Ren, first I need to apologize for Grace. She just has a hot temper and speaks without thinking. Please don't take it to heart." He was playing the role of the reasonable one. "She is just really worried. This trip is a company reward vacation that we couldn't postpone. We originally planned to have my mother watch him, but she got sick at the last minute. We really had no choice but to ask for your help." He spoke as if he were completely innocent and had no other options. I laughed coldly. "Your choice was to silently dump a 3-year-old child at a family member's doorstep and then run off to Hawaii to enjoy sunshine and beaches." My voice dripped with sarcasm. "Sounds like your company has excellent benefits. Money for luxury vacations but nothing for childcare." His tone stiffened. Realizing that his conciliatory approach wasn't working on me, he switched tactics and tried moral manipulation. "Ren, you can't talk like that. We're sisters. Blood is thicker than water. Every family has emergencies. How can you be so heartless as a young person? Sending a child to that kind of place at $100 a day, isn't that just taking advantage?" "Heartless?" I responded as if I'd heard the joke of the century. "When your precious son destroyed my $8,000 illustration with a carton of milk, where were you to talk to me about blood being thicker than water? When I was exhausted and sleepless for 2 days and nights because of him, where were you to discuss family feelings with me?" "Connor, spare me your hypocritical rhetoric. Helping is helping, emergencies are emergencies. But don't dress up taking advantage as something so noble and pure." Heavy breathing came through the phone. Having been thoroughly refuted, he finally dropped his pretense. "Ren, don't push your luck." His voice turned menacing. "I am warning you, don't think we can't do anything because we're far away. When we get back, you'll get what is coming to you. Do you believe I'll tell Uncle Dale and Aunt Joy that you are abusing my son? Threatening me?" This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. I immediately opened the video file stored on my phone and held it near the microphone. Grace's words, "I need you to watch Tyler for a few days," and Tyler's subsequent wailing came through clearly to the other end of the line. "Connor, did you hear that?" I said calmly. "The surveillance video of your wife forcing the child on me, the call records, the daycare contract, I have all the evidence. You are welcome to file complaints anytime. I'd love to see whether Mom and Dad will come looking for me or for you two irresponsible parents after hearing all this." I emphasized my words. "Also, let me give you a friendly reminder. Sunshine Hills charges by the day, continuously accumulating. Every day you stay in Hawaii adds another $100 to the bill. The later you come back, the higher the fees you'll need to pay." He only managed one word before becoming completely speechless. Finally, amid suppressed cursing, he angrily hung up. I carefully organized and packaged these 2 call recordings, backing them up to the cloud. These were my ammunition. This war had only just begun. They returned much sooner than I had expected. Their planned 2-week vacation ended abruptly on the 6th day. That afternoon, my doorbell was pressed repeatedly with deafening persistence. Through the peephole, I saw Grace and Connor's faces, both filled with exhaustion and fury. They looked like they'd come straight from the airport, still wearing their travel clothes and dragging suitcases, charging directly to my door. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Ren, as soon as Grace saw me, she exploded like a lit firecracker, screaming as she tried to rush toward me. Connor grabbed her arm tightly, holding her back. You heartless. How dare you rob us? Over $1,000, you scammed us out of over $1,000. She pointed at my nose, unleashing a torrent of profanity. Her voice was loud enough to immediately attract attention from other neighbors in the hallway. Several doors quietly cracked open, including Mrs. Peterson, who lived across from me. Mrs. Peterson was a retired nurse who was generally fair-minded and particularly disapproved of Grace's irresponsible behavior. Ignored Grace's screaming completely and didn't say a word. I simply calmly pulled out my phone, opened the video recording function, and aimed the lens at her contorted face. The red recording indicator light stared at her like a pair of cold, silent eyes. Grace's screaming faltered momentarily when she saw my action. Connor quickly stepped in to mediate, forcing a smile that looked more painful than crying. Ren, don't do this. Let's talk nicely. First, give us our child back. About the money, we can discuss that slowly, okay? He tried to reach out and block my phone. The child is at Sunshine Hills Daycare, not in my house. The contract clearly states in black and white that if you pay the fees, you can naturally take the child home. My calmness formed a stark contrast to Grace's hysteria. That is nonsense. Grace began wailing again, this time with theatrical tears. You have no conscience. You are conspiring with outsiders to steal our money. Tyler is only 3 years old. How could you bear to throw him alone into that kind of place? She was trying to use tears to gain sympathy, painting herself as a pitiful victim. Just then, a clear voice spoke up. Grace, that is not right. It was Mrs. Peterson. She opened her door and stepped out, holding a garbage bag, clearly having been prepared for this moment. That day you forced the child on Ren and ran off with your suitcase. Several of us in this hallway saw it happen. Ren is an unmarried young woman who helped you watch your child. Instead of saying thank you, how can you block her door and curse at her? Mrs. Peterson's words were like a stone thrown into murky water. The surrounding neighbors who had been watching began whispering among themselves, their gazes shifting from curiosity to disdain and accusation toward Grace and Connor. Exactly, leaving your child with family while you go have fun. What kind of behavior is that? This young lady has a good temperament. If it were me, I would have called the police directly. Being irresponsible yourself, then having the nerve to scold others. Public opinion instantly reversed. Grace's face alternated between red and white, her wailing caught in her throat. Connor's expression became even more unpleasant. Looking at them, I felt the timing was perfect. In front of everyone, I picked up my phone and dialed the apartment building's security office. Hello, is this security? There are people on the 15th floor blocking doors and harassing residents. Please send someone to handle this situation. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone present to hear. Grace and Connor's expressions at that moment were as dramatic as a silent film. Within 2 minutes, 2 security guards came up in the elevator. Under the pointing and whispering of onlookers and the guards urging to talk nicely and not disturb other residents, Grace and Connor left with grim faces, eventually slinking back to their own apartment with their suitcases. The hallway finally returned to quiet. Grace and Connor clearly hadn't given up. The next day they went directly to Sunshine Hills Daycare. I could imagine the scene. They probably thought they could use the same tantrums and theatrics on the daycare that they'd tried on me. Unfortunately, they had picked the wrong target. Mrs. Peterson witnessed the entire incident while picking up her granddaughter, who also attended Sunshine Hills, but in the regular program, and came back to tell me the story as entertainment. According to her, Grace and Connor marched in demanding to immediately take their child, aggressively stating they wouldn't pay a single penny. The daycare reception staff were professionally trained and didn't argue with them. Instead, they smiled and invited them into the reception room. Soon, two uniformed, imposing security guards positioned themselves not far from the reception room door. Then Miss Johnson personally came out to meet with them. Faced with Grace's screaming and Connor's accusations, Miss Johnson maintained her professional smile throughout. She wasn't hurried or flustered. First, she methodically presented the emergency special care contract that I had signed on their behalf. Then she played the video evidence I had provided right in front of them. Finally, she produced a detailed report that had been created for Tyler during his stay. The report was apparently made like a beautiful album. It documented Tyler's crying and resistance on his first day, his emotional instability. It recorded how on the second day, with one-on-one teacher support, he began trying to eat with a fork by himself. It documented how on the third day he learned to put toys back where they belonged and said his first thank you when helped. It recorded how on the fourth day he participated in art class, finger painting, and smiled happily. Mr. and Mrs. Black, Miss Johnson smiled at them. According to the contract, you need to settle the full fee for these 6 days, a total of $600, before we can process the withdrawal procedure. We cannot accept you taking the child without clearing the outstanding fees. She paused and added, furthermore, as long as the child remains with us for each additional day, fees will continue to accumulate. Grace was about to explode right there, wanting to throw a tantrum in the lobby. But when she looked around, all she saw were well-dressed, refined parents attending the daycare's parent-child reading session with their children. Every single person was looking at her like she was a circus clown. Her usual tactics that worked in the apartment building seemed completely out of place and crude in this environment. One sharp-eyed parent quietly commented to someone nearby, "Isn't that the family who sent their child to Sunshine Hills but is behind on payments?" How embarrassing. The voice wasn't loud, but it struck Grace and Connor like a resounding slap. Their faces turned liver-colored as they stood there, unable to leave or stay. Finally, Miss Johnson delivered the killing blow. Still maintaining her polite smile, she informed them, "If you haven't come to resolve this matter within 3 days, we will have no choice but to engage a professional third-party collection agency for further communication. I hope you understand." Professional collection agency. Those 5 words were like 5 nails, completely sealing any remaining hope Grace and Connor might have had. They knew they had kicked an iron plate this time. The collection agency's calls were more scorching than Hawaiian sunshine. After just 1 round, Grace and Connor completely wilted. They probably researched the background of this third-party agency and realized it wasn't someone they could mess with. Eventually, they had to scrape together money from various sources to go to the daycare and settle the account. 1 week at a daily rate of $100, plus the $300 I had advanced, along with various miscellaneous course material fees, totaled nearly $1,000. Mrs. Peterson said she saw Grace's hands trembling uncontrollably when she swiped her card at the POS machine. That money was probably their vacation shopping budget, now entirely sacrificed to the son they had abandoned. After paying, they finally saw Tyler. At that moment, Tyler was sitting quietly at a small table with other children, having afternoon tea. He wore a clean, well-fitting daycare uniform, his hair neatly combed, his little face clean and tidy. He didn't cry and rush to them as he used to. He simply put down his small fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, got down from his chair, and walked to them. He looked up at his parents with a tender but clear voice, politely and even somewhat formally saying in both English and Mandarin, "Daddy, Mommy, good afternoon." Grace and Connor were both stunned. A young teacher approached and handed Grace an observation journal and a family cooperation recommendation booklet. "Mrs. Black, This is Tyler's growth record for this week, and some of our suggestions. We hope it will be helpful to you. Grace looked at the teacher's professional smile, then at her son who seemed to have been reformatted, and that inexplicable anger surged up inside her. Just as she was about to explode, Tyler tugged at her clothes. "Mommy," he said quietly. "The teacher said that shouting in public places is impolite behavior." Right at the tip of her tongue were completely choked back by her own son's words. Her face turned red from holding back like a deflating balloon, unable to say a single word. The atmosphere in the car on the way home was even more bizarre. Connor habitually lit a cigarette in the car. Tyler immediately frowned. "Daddy, there is smoke smell in the car. It is bad for your health. Please open the window." He also pointed to the coat his father had casually thrown on the passenger seat. "Also, the teacher said we should keep our things tidy." Grace and Connor looked at each other, both seeing deep shock and a trace of panic in the other's eyes. What they had paid dearly to redeem didn't seem like their son, but rather a small butler programmed with unfamiliar software. This child had been educated too well. So well that he himself became an invisible, constantly tormenting, razor-sharp blade. This expensive trip and the experience of redeeming their son left Grace and Connor severely depleted. Their hatred toward me also escalated to its peak. Since they didn't dare confront me directly, they began playing petty, underhanded games. For instance, deliberately standing in the hallway outside my door late at night around 11 o'clock loudly talking on the phone or having marital arguments. Or when cleaning their own doorway, accidentally sweeping dust and paper scraps onto my doormat. These behaviors were disgusting but difficult to catch red-handed. Unfortunately, they underestimated me. After their first tantrum at my door, I had already anticipated subsequent harassment. I installed a high-definition night vision camera with high-fidelity audio recording capabilities directly across from my door, facing the hallway. Every single one of their supposedly secretive harassment attempts was recorded by my camera 24 hours a day without blind spots. I had been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That morning when I opened my door to take out trash, I found that my new bamboo fiber doormat had been deliberately doused with a large amount of sticky, dark brown cola. The mat was completely ruined. Looking at that stain, I felt no anger whatsoever. My heart was completely calm. I closed the door and returned to my computer, pulling up the surveillance footage from 2015 in the morning. The video clearly showed Grace sneaking around with a cola bottle, unscrewing the cap and deliberately pouring it on my doormat, then quickly scurrying back to her own apartment. The entire process was captured with crystal clarity, including the malicious expression on her face. The timestamp was precise to the second. I captured this crucial video segment and took a photo of my ruined doormat. Then I opened our apartment building's resident WhatsApp group. I posted the video and photos together, followed by a carefully composed message. "Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to disturb you. Recently, my neighbor in apartment 15B seems to have some personal misunderstanding with me. Over the past half-month, they have frequently loitered outside my door late at night, created noise, and littered. This morning they directly poured cola onto my doormat. These behaviors have seriously affected my normal life. Above is last night's surveillance video and this morning's photos. I have saved all relevant evidence. If my life and personal safety continue to be affected, I will consider reporting this directly to the police. Property Manager Miller, please help with hallway cleaning. Thank you." The moment I sent the message, the previously quiet resident group exploded like a bomb had been dropped into it. My God, that is so disgusting. How can 15B be this kind of people? I remember this family. Aren't they the ones who dumped their kid on family and went on vacation? Such poor character, they're like a cancer in our apartment building. Neighbors who had previously witnessed their tantrum came forward to testify for me. Mrs. Peterson directly posted in the group, "This behavior isn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. It is disturbing the peace. Ren, I support you calling the police." The property manager, being tagged, didn't dare delay and immediately responded. Ren Black received, "We'll send cleaning staff immediately and will seriously warn the 15B residents. We'll also increase security patrols on the 15th floor." In that moment, Grace and Connor were publicly executed in this respectable community they cared so much about. They had completely suffered social death. After being seriously warned by the property manager accompanied by 2 security guards, and being publicly humiliated in the resident group, Grace and Connor finally quieted down. Now, when they encounter me in the hallway, they slink away with their heads down like mice seeing a cat. My world became peaceful, but their world began falling apart due to my counterattack. The bigger trouble came from within their own family. Tyler, that child who had been reformatted by Sunshine Hills, created intense conflicts between the good habits he'd developed at daycare and the messy, chaotic lifestyle of their home. He would refuse to come to the table because Grace and Connor didn't wash their hands before eating, and wouldn't sit down until they did. He would pick up the smelly socks his father carelessly threw on the sofa, put them in the laundry basket, then seriously tell him, "Daddy, this is unsanitary." He would refuse to eat the greasy takeout Grace ordered, crying and saying, "I want to eat vegetables. The teacher said we need nutritional balance." Grace became increasingly irritated by her son's rules and finally couldn't help yelling at him. Tyler didn't burst into tears like before. He simply looked calmly at his mother and used the standard phrases he'd learned at daycare to counter. "Mommy, being emotional cannot solve problems. We should sit down and communicate properly." This statement instantly silenced Grace, leaving her with a breath stuck in her chest that she couldn't swallow or release. Connor felt the child had become abnormal, like a little adult, no longer cute at all. He tried to use rough methods to bend the child back into the crying, easily controlled version he used to be. This behavior triggered even more intense emotional reactions from Tyler, who protested his parents' unreasonableness with earth-shattering wails. A child who could once be managed with a spanking or a piece of candy had now become a little adult, who required logic, communication, and respect. This was absolutely catastrophic for Grace and Connor, who were accustomed to solving problems in the simplest, most brutal ways. Their family life became perpetually chaotic due to these good habits of their child. Grace even complained to Mrs. Peterson more than once that she was beginning to miss her son when he would just wail and cry. They finally discovered a cruel truth. The angel baby they had paid dearly to redeem was only an angel in the clean, orderly, rule-based environment of Sunshine Hills. Once back in their garbage dump of selfishness, chaos, and impatience, he became the most troublesome little butler, a mirror constantly reminding them of their failures. The enormous financial loss, intense conflicts over parenting styles, and social death in their neighborhood relationships pressed down on Grace and Connor's marriage. Like 3 mountains, they began arguing frequently, blaming each other. Grace blamed Connor for being incompetent, unable to earn good money, causing her to be looked down upon. Connor cursed her for being a troublemaker, stupid and vain, leading to all of today's problems. I could faintly hear their arguments even through my thick walls. During one argument more intense than any before, the final straw that broke the camel's back appeared. That night, Grace's shrill voice cut through the hallway's silence. "Damn it. You still have the nerve to blame me. If you hadn't insisted on that stupid comparison, hadn't insisted on going to that awful Hawaii, would we have wasted that $1,000+?" This sentence was like a poisoned dagger, stabbing straight into the heart of their marriage. Even more unfortunately, this sentence was clearly heard by Tyler, who had just returned from playing at Mrs. Peterson's house. The child pushed open the door and stood in the doorway, looking up at his mother with her twisted features. In an innocent, confused tone he asked, "Mommy, what is wasted money?" He paused, confusion filling his clear eyes. "Is it me?" Mrs. Peterson said. She was at the door at the time and saw Grace completely freeze when she heard her son's question, looking into those pure, innocent eyes. All her anger, grievance, and unwillingness instantly evaporated, leaving only enormous, unspeakable shame and collapse. She covered her face and crouched on the floor, letting out suppressed sobs. All this was later told to me by Mrs. Peterson as gossip. After listening, my heart remained completely unmoved. I didn't even have the slightest hint of a sarcastic smile. I simply felt that all of this was nothing more than karma, reaping what they had sown. After that argument, Connor began staying out late frequently. He constantly used overtime as an excuse, but was really just unwilling to come home and face his hysterical wife and increasingly sensible son. The home that had once been their pride and bragging rights had now become a prison he desperately wanted to escape. This family built on selfishness and calculation was already on the verge of complete breakdown. I thought my story with Grace would end with her social death in the apartment building and their family on the brink of collapse. I never expected her to have the courage to knock on my door again. That afternoon I was rushing to complete a new illustration when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw her, haggard-faced with dark circles under her eyes, completely lacking her former arrogance. I hesitated for a moment, then still opened the door. I was curious to see what new tricks she might try. This time she didn't throw a tantrum or scream. As soon as the door opened, her eyes reddened, and with a heavy crying voice, she spoke to me in what was almost a pleading tone. Ren. She surprisingly didn't use that commanding tone. I came to ask for your advice, to ask how to educate children. I was stunned. She said Tyler had become a complete little emperor at home, refusing to listen to anyone, only recognizing the rules taught by Sunshine Hills teachers. Whatever she and Connor said, the child countered with "teacher says," leaving them completely helpless. She asked me how I had thought to send the child to that place originally. Looking at her face written with exhaustion and desperation, I found it both ridiculous and pitiful. I spoke flatly, my voice devoid of emotion. I never intended to educate him. I simply chose what seemed to me the most professional place that could best help you bear responsibility. My words seemed to give her a glimmer of hope. She began crying to me about how difficult it was to care for a child. How Connor didn't understand her, how tight money was for them now. She was trying to gain my sympathy through playing the victim. Finally, she revealed her real purpose. Ren, could you lend me some money? Not much. Just $200 or $300. I want to enroll Tyler in a cheaper early education class to help him forget those Sunshine Hills rules. Otherwise, life is really unbearable. I felt like I was watching an unrepentant gambler who had lost everything but still wanted to borrow money to try again. I refused her directly. First, your predicament wasn't caused by me. It is the direct consequence of your and your husband's selfish behavior. Second, I am not running a charity. I have neither the obligation nor the interest in participating in your train wreck of a life. I stepped forward and looked directly into her eyes, speaking word by word. Grace, you've misunderstood something fundamental. The essence of education was never about how much money you spend or how expensive the school is. The best education is parents leading by example. Whatever kind of person you are, your child will ultimately become that kind of person. No matter how much money you spend or how good the place you send him to, it is only temporary. When he comes back to you, he'll either be re-assimilated by you or, like now, become a mirror that leaves you with nowhere to hide. Earn your own dignity. Take responsibility for your own life. Each of my words was like a scalpel, precisely cutting open the festering wound she was trying to wrap in tears and lies. Grace was struck at her deepest pain point. She stood there stunned, face pale, lips trembling, unable to say a single word. I didn't want to waste another word on her. I stepped back and closed the door. The loud bang completely shut out all her crying, scheming, and wretchedness from my world. Some time later, while taking out trash, I saw a real estate agent bringing clients into Grace's apartment. A few days after that, Mrs. Peterson came to tell me that the family in 15B was preparing to sell their place. Apparently they had charged their Hawaii trip to credit cards. Later, to settle the daycare fees for their child, they borrowed personal loans. Now, with compound interest, their finances had completely collapsed. They had no choice but to sell their current 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment and move to the suburbs to buy a small 1-bedroom, using the remaining money to pay off debts. Hearing this news, my heart felt completely peaceful. I had finally achieved the absolute tranquility I deserved. Moving day was overcast. I stood by my window watching Grace, Connor, and the moving company workers silently and quickly load packed boxes onto the truck. Throughout the process, they kept their heads down, wearing masks, walking hurriedly, desperately trying to avoid eye contact with any passing neighbors. They looked utterly defeated. Tyler wore an ill-fitting old shirt, quietly following behind them. Just as he was about to get in the car, he seemed to sense something and looked up toward my window. All eyes met across the distance. I saw him hesitate for a moment, then bow deeply toward my direction. His lips moved, and though I couldn't hear his voice, I could read his lips. He said, "Sister, goodbye." I was somewhat surprised, but I still nodded gently toward him in response. Watching that truck loaded with a family's brokenness and future slowly drive away from the apartment building, and finally disappear at the end of the street, I knew this farce triggered by selfishness and stupidity had finally come to an end. I turned and walked into the kitchen to brew myself a cup of richly aromatic coffee. I carried my coffee back to the window. The sky had somehow cleared, sunshine breaking through the clouds and spilling into the courtyard below. Everything appeared so bright and full of life. Even the air seemed much fresher. My life had finally completely returned to its proper track. I even received a commission from a well-known comic platform. Because of my textbook perfect response in the resident group, they felt I had great life wisdom and hoped I could create a series about modern urban neighborly relationships. I gladly accepted. I leaned back in my comfortable chair, sipping my coffee, and began sketching the outline of my first character on the drawing board. It was a girl wearing frameless glasses, with calm and determined eyes. She understood that kindness needs to have some edge. She understood even more that adults must pay the price for every choice they make. I know deeply that in this world the most important thing isn't being a likable good person, but being a principled, boundaried, intelligent person who can protect herself. Father Dale and Mother Joy taught me from childhood that family members should help each other. But the premise of help is respect and responsibility. Grace clearly treated this blood relationship as her reason to take freely without ever thinking about giving anything in return. Now she finally understood a truth. There is no taking for granted in this world, and no gaining without paying a price.